Part 1. Life was good. No, scratch that. Life was great. I was married to Linda, the woman I'd been head over heels for since college. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking into it, her laughter the type that made heads turn, her smile a warmth you couldn't help but gravitate toward. And she chose me. Out of everyone she could have been with, Linda picked me. That always made me feel like the luckiest guy in the world. We've been married for 8 years, living in a beautiful suburban neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a big yard I took pride in keeping pristine, and the kind of white picket fence you'd see on a postcard. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, bought with hard work, late nights, and a lot of shared dreams. We used to joke that it was the American dream, just missing a dog and kids, but we were happy with just us. Linda worked as a marketing executive at a well-known firm downtown. She'd been climbing the corporate ladder fast, her tenacity and brilliance making her a rising star. She thrived in that high-paced environment, navigating meetings and presentations like a seasoned pro. I admired her drive. Sometimes I'd pick her up from the office just to watch her walk out with that confident stride of hers, her phone in hand, always making deals or wrapping up loose ends. She made business casual look like something straight off a runway. I was a software engineer with a cushy remote job that paid well and gave me the freedom to work from home most days. It was the perfect setup. I'd wake up early, make coffee for the both of us, and see Linda off to work with a kiss that lingered a little longer than necessary. The kind that left her smiling as she walked out the door. And when she came home, dinner would be ready. We'd eat together, talk about our days, then usually end up tangled on the couch watching some show we'd end up binging in a week. I made it a point to spoil her whenever I could. Weekend getaways to the coast, surprise date nights, breakfast in bed on Saturdays when she wanted nothing more than to stay buried under the covers. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing her, in every little way, that she was everything to me. Making her happy was like a drug, one I couldn't get enough of. And she seemed to love it. Our anniversary was coming up, 8 years together, and still, Linda had the same effect on me as she did when we first met. That mix of confidence and kindness wrapped up in a woman who never settled for less than what she wanted. And she wanted me. At least, that's how it felt. We were planning a trip to the Outer Banks, just the two of us. Linda's mom was going to house sit and water the plants while we were gone. I'd gone all out this time, booked a luxury beachfront cottage with huge windows overlooking the ocean. I even arranged for a private chef to cook dinner for us one night. The kind of trip that would remind us both why we worked so hard in the first place. Just to enjoy moments like that. Linda was excited, and so was I. We spent nights talking about what we'd do once we got there. She wanted to go kayaking, explore some nature trails. I wanted to do absolutely nothing but lie on the beach and read whatever trashy detective novel I could get my hands on. We'd laugh about it, always compromising, always finding a way to make both of us happy. Even our routines were comfortable. Monday through Friday was the usual grind, Linda hustling at work, me handling things at home. I'd clean, shop, cook, keep everything running smoothly so that when Linda got home, she could relax. We'd settle into the couch most nights, watching Netflix or playing some old-school board games. Linda had a knack for winning, whether it was Monopoly or Scrabble. I swear she had the dictionary memorized. She was fiercely competitive but never a sore loser. That was Linda, strong-willed, sharp, but always playful. She made life fun. The weekends were our time to break away from the routine. Hiking, dining out, hitting the city's art galleries, or just taking long drives through the countryside with no particular destination in mind. Sometimes, we'd park by the lake and just sit there, talking about everything and nothing. I spent most of my days feeling like I'd hit the jackpot, and I tried to make sure Linda knew it. Gifts for no reason, flowers delivered to her office, little notes slipped into her purse before she left for work. It was cheesy as hell, but she loved it. Or at least, she acted like she did. Our friends envied our relationship. They'd tell us we were perfect for each other, that they wished they had what we had. I'd laugh it off, but it made me proud. Proud that I could be the man who made her happy. Proud that she looked at me like I was the only one in the world who mattered. Everything just seemed so solid. I couldn't imagine life any other way. It was like we had our own little kingdom, Linda and I ruling side by side. Whatever life threw our way, I was convinced we could handle it. It was just us, and that was all I needed. We were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. Part 2. Part 2. First red flags. It didn't happen all at once. The changes crept in so subtly that, at first, I didn't even notice them. If life was a song, then this was a discordant note buried deep in the melody, easy to miss unless you were really listening. But soon enough, it was all I could hear. Linda's work had always been demanding, but suddenly, her hours stretched longer. The late nights that used to be occasional turned into a routine. She'd call or text me from the office saying something came up, a last-minute meeting or a project that just couldn't wait. It made sense. She was ambitious, driven. It was one of the things I loved most about her. But still, something felt different. It wasn't just the hours. It was the way she'd come home. The usual cheerfulness was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite place. A distance, maybe. She'd walk through the door, mumble something about being tired, then disappear into the shower for longer than usual. Afterward, she'd curl up on the couch and half listen to me talk about my day, her eyes fixed on her phone like it held the answer to some secret she couldn't let go of. We started having dinner later and later. I'd find myself reheating her plate more nights than not. And when we did eat together, the conversations felt forced, stilted. The easy flow we'd always shared was now a trickle. I'd try to make her laugh with some dumb joke or story from my day, and she'd smile, but it was a hollow sort of smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself she was just stressed, that the promotion she'd been eyeing for months was finally within reach, and she was pouring everything she had into getting it. I even admired her for it. But admiration only goes so far when it feels like the person you love is drifting away. Then there were the texts. Linda had always been glued to her phone, work emails, social media, the usual distractions. But now, she seemed almost paranoid about it. She'd angle the screen away from me whenever I happened to glance her way. And when a notification popped up, she'd swipe it away so fast it was like a reflex. One night, I reached for her phone to check the weather. It was sitting right there on the coffee table, her screen glowing softly in the dim room. Without thinking, I picked it up, but before I could even unlock it, she snatched it out of my hand like I just tried to steal her wallet. Jesus, William, can't you just use your own phone? She snapped. I stared at her, bewildered by the sudden hostility. I was just checking the weather. She softened almost immediately, her shoulders slumping as if she realized she'd overreacted. Sorry. It's just work stuff. There's been so much pressure lately, and I guess I'm wound up. Yeah, I get it, I said, forcing a smile. But the unease lodged itself in my chest like a splinter that wouldn't come out. The next few weeks followed the same pattern. Linda's mood swings grew sharper, her patience thinner. And the intimacy between us, the closeness that used to be effortless, began to feel like something we had to force. She was always tired, always preoccupied. Even when we were together, it felt like her mind was miles away. I tried talking to her about it once, bringing up the long hours and the way she seemed so distant. We were sitting on the couch, some movie playing in the background that neither of us was actually watching. Linda, are you sure everything's okay? You've been, I don't know, different lately. She frowned, her gaze flicking toward her phone resting on the arm of the couch. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're working all the time, and when you're home, it's like you're not really here. Her expression hardened. You know how important this promotion is to me. Or do you not want me to succeed? That's not what I'm saying, I replied, taken aback by the sudden defensiveness. I just miss you, that's all. Well, maybe if you had something going on in your own life, you wouldn't be so focused on mine. The words hit me like a slap. Linda must have seen the hurt in my eyes because she sighed and rubbed her temples. I didn't mean that. I don't know. Stressed. Tired. Work's been hell, and I guess I'm taking it out on you. I'm sorry. It's okay, I said, though it wasn't. But I didn't want to push her. The last thing I wanted was to add to whatever stress she was dealing with. So I let it go. But the pattern continued. More late nights, more distance. I started to dread the sound of her car pulling into the driveway because I never knew which version of Linda was going to walk through the door. The one who used to greet me with a kiss and a smile, or the one who barely acknowledged me before retreating to the bedroom. The silence between us grew. Conversations became brief exchanges about groceries, bills, and logistics, anything that didn't require emotional investment. I felt like I was living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. And whenever I tried to break through the wall between us, she'd find a way to deflect or dismiss my concerns. I tried to convince myself that this was just a phase, that the stress from her job would eventually pass, and things would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew something had shifted, and it wasn't something that would just fix itself. Something was wrong, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Part 3. The betrayal. I came back from my work trip a day early. A rare stroke of luck, an overachieving client wrapping things up ahead of schedule. I was exhausted but happy, eager to surprise Linda. I hadn't told her I'd be back until the following night. Part of me hoped that maybe a small surprise would rekindle whatever spark seemed to be dimming between us. The flight landed late, and by the time I pulled into our driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, the windows blank and empty. I fumbled with my keys, juggling my suitcase while trying to unlock the door as quietly as possible. I wanted to catch her off guard, to see that smile she used to flash whenever I came home unexpectedly. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was thick, stale, the kind of stillness that wasn't natural for our home. I noticed her shoes were by the door, along with another pair. Men's sneakers. Big, dirty things that looked out of place against the polished hardwood floor. My stomach twisted, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe Linda had a friend over. Maybe her brother was crashing on the couch after a late night out. I forced myself to breathe, pushing away the sick feeling clawing at my insides. The kitchen light was on, a low, muted glow spilling out into the hallway. I took slow, careful steps, my pulse thudding in my ears. As I got closer, the sound of muffled voices hit me. A man's laugh, deep and rumbling, followed by Linda's unmistakable giggle, the one she used to save for me. The kitchen door was half open. I nudged it just enough to see inside. And there she was, Linda, my wife, in the arms of some guy I'd never seen before, their embrace far too familiar and intimate. For a moment, I just stood there, rooted to the spot. My brain couldn't catch up to what my eyes were seeing. It felt like someone had ripped the air right out of my lungs, leaving me cold and empty. But then something else took over, a kind of calm that felt alien, detached. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit the record button. If this was happening, if this nightmare was real, then I needed proof. My hand was steady, my grip tight as I filmed the whole disgusting scene. They were too engrossed in each other to notice me, too wrapped up in their own world to realize everything was about to change. It couldn't have been more than a minute, but it felt like a lifetime. I recorded enough, my thumb finally pressing stop. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I wanted to burst into the kitchen and confront them. I wanted to scream at Linda, demand an explanation for the betrayal she'd so casually served me. But I didn't, because something colder had already settled over me, a resolve that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with survival. I backed away from the door, careful not to make a sound. Whatever conversation needed to happen, it sure as hell wasn't happening tonight. The man's voice carried through the kitchen, something casual and taunting that made my fists clench. But I kept moving, one step after another until I was outside, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. I climbed into my car, hands trembling as I jammed the key into the ignition. I drove away, not even sure where I was going. The anger was there, simmering beneath the surface, but so was something else. A clarity that scared me with how sharp it felt. I ended up at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody asks questions and the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor's TV blaring through the night. I threw my suitcase onto the bed and collapsed into the chair by the window, my phone clutched so hard my knuckles turned white. I played the video back, forcing myself to watch it, forcing myself to see Linda's betrayal laid bare. Every second of it was a knife to the gut, but I didn't look away. This was my life now. Whatever illusions I'd been clinging to were shattered. By the time the sun came up, I'd already made up my mind. Linda had thrown away everything we'd built, so casually, so carelessly. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She'd show me exactly who she was, and now it was my turn to show her what I could be. She wasn't just going to lose me. She was going to lose everything. Part 4. Part 4. The Revenge Plan. I spent that entire night wide awake, staring at the cheap motel ceiling with its water stains and peeling paint. The video was still on my phone, untouched since I'd played it back in those first burning minutes of rage. But the rage was cooling now, solidifying into something far more dangerous: focus. By morning, I had a plan. If Linda was willing to throw away everything we'd built, then she wasn't going to get away with it unscathed. She wanted her secret life? Fine. I was going to make sure that was all she had left. I drove back home early, knowing Linda would be at work. Parking down the street to avoid tipping her off, I let myself in and went straight to the spare bedroom where I kept some of my old tech gear. Over the years, I dabbled in building computers and setting up security systems, nothing fancy, but enough to know my way around surveillance devices. I installed a few hidden cameras around the house. One in the living room, another in the kitchen, and one in our bedroom. It was all legal. It was my house, after all. And if Linda wanted to make it her playground, then I was going to capture every second of it. The cameras were tiny, barely noticeable unless you knew exactly where to look. I synced them up to my laptop, making sure I could access the footage remotely from my phone. It wasn't just about catching her in the act again. It was about control, information, power. But that wasn't all. I needed to secure my finances. First, I logged into my personal bank accounts and moved most of the money into a separate account Linda had no access to. Next, I called my lawyer, an old friend from college named Mark who'd handled some business contracts for me in the past. Mark wasn't thrilled when I explained what was happening, but he was thorough. Within hours, he had drafted a prenuptial review, gathered information on state divorce laws, and advised me on what steps to take to ensure Linda couldn't get her hands on anything I didn't want her to. If she's cheating, and you can prove it, that's going to work in your favor, Mark told me over the phone, his tone crisp and professional. But you have to be smart about this. Don't confront her. Not yet. Gather your evidence, and when you're ready, we'll proceed. I followed his advice to the letter. I went through everything, our shared computer, her social media accounts, anything that might hold a clue to how long this had been going on. It was surprisingly easy. Linda must have assumed I'd never look. Or maybe she just didn't care. A few days later, I found exactly what I was looking for. Conversations between Linda and the man I'd caught her with. Texts, emails, even a couple of private messages exchanged on some app I'd never even heard of. It was all there, laid out like a roadmap of betrayal. The worst part was reading her words. Seeing her affection for him, her complaints about me. How boring I was. How she craved excitement and spontaneity. As if the life we'd built together was some sort of prison. I saved everything. Screenshots, recordings, copies of every digital exchange I could find. I wasn't just building a case for divorce. I was building a fortress around myself, making sure Linda couldn't touch anything I didn't want her to. But I wasn't done. The next step was to make sure her world started falling apart, piece by piece. Linda's job was everything to her. That precious promotion she'd been fighting for, the reputation she'd built among her colleagues, it was her pride, her identity. So I decided to hit her where it hurt most. I knew a guy named Jacob who worked in IT security. We'd crossed paths a few years back when I needed help with a cybersecurity project. I called him up, explained my situation, and asked him to do a little digging into Linda's work computer. Nothing illegal, just some friendly advice on how to access files I might find useful. Jacob was good. Real good. Within a day, he'd guided me through the process of accessing Linda's company emails. What I found was a goldmine of inappropriate conversations she'd had on company time. Some of them were personal, but others bordered on unprofessional enough to warrant disciplinary action if anyone found out. I compiled everything, sorting it into neatly labeled folders. It wasn't just about hurting her. It was about making sure I came out of this unscathed. She tried to destroy me. Now it was my turn. The last piece of my plan was making sure Linda would never see it coming. I played my part perfectly. When she came home late, I greeted her with a smile. When she dismissed my attempts at conversation, I shrugged it off like it was nothing. She assumed I was still clueless. The cameras continued to capture everything. Her late-night phone calls, the moments she'd leave the house looking far too polished for someone supposedly drowning in work. The excuses, the lies. It was almost too easy. And as the days went by, my determination grew stronger. I wasn't just taking back control. I was reclaiming my life. And soon, Linda was going to find out just how far I was willing to go. Part 5. Part 5. The comeback. I never confronted Linda. Not directly, anyway. She didn't deserve the satisfaction of knowing I'd been torn apart by her betrayal. She didn't deserve the pleasure of a screaming match, of tears and accusations hurled back and forth until one of us broke down. No, she was going to get something far colder. When I served her the divorce papers, she looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. She stammered something about me, overreacting, and how we could work things out. But when I handed her the file of evidence I'd compiled, every screenshot, every recording, every humiliating detail, I saw the exact moment her hope died. I made sure to have it all delivered to her office. Not by a lawyer, not through the mail. I wanted her to feel the embarrassment of having it arrive during her precious workday, her colleagues just a few feet away. I wanted her to squirm, to realize that her world was crumbling and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Linda begged. She pleaded. She called and texted until my phone buzzed itself to death. Apologies, explanations, desperate attempts to reel me back in. I ignored every single one of them. I stayed in the house, not her. I'd paid for most of it, and I made sure my lawyer knew exactly how much of my money had gone into building our so-called dream home. Linda was the one who had to pack her bags and leave. She tried to fight me on it, but the evidence I'd gathered made her threats empty. She had no leverage. As for her precious career, I made sure her employer received an anonymous package detailing her extracurricular activities on company time. Those private conversations she thought were safely tucked away in obscure messaging apps? They weren't so private after all. From what I heard, she wasn't fired, but she was put on some sort of probation. Whatever chance she had at that promotion evaporated. Her credibility tarnished, and I knew it ate at her. My lawyer was a shark, tearing through every obstacle Linda tried to throw up. She'd been foolish enough to leave a paper trail, and Mark used every scrap of it to make sure I walked away with everything that mattered. The divorce was finalized in a matter of months. Linda tried to play the victim, crying to her friends, painting me as some controlling monster who'd driven her to her actions. But anyone who actually knew me saw right through her act. Friends who'd once been mutual stopped returning her calls. Her social circle shrank until all she had left were the enablers who couldn't see her for what she truly was. And even they started to drift away when they realized there was nothing left to gain from being around her. I expected to feel empty once it was all over, to feel like something was missing. But the truth was, I felt free, like I'd been dragging a weight around for years without even realizing it. I threw myself into work, started taking on projects I'd put off for far too long, built connections, expanded my network, even launched my own software development company. What had started as a side hustle now grew into something far bigger, far more rewarding than I ever could have imagined. I hit the gym harder than ever, sculpting myself into a version of me I didn't even recognize. Someone stronger, sharper, relentless. I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me. Traveling became my new passion. I visited places I'd only ever dreamed of. Bali, Tokyo, Santorini. I hiked through rainforests, swam in crystal-clear waters, stood on top of mountains, and looked down at the world like I owned it. Along the way, I met people who added something real to my life. Friends who weren't tied to my past. Business partners who respected me for my skills, not just as some guy trying to play nice. Women who were genuine, who didn't play games or hide behind layers of deception. Linda's attempts to reach me dwindled over time. The messages grew less frequent. Her voicemails more desperate and broken. I never replied. Not once. She didn't deserve even that much. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was struggling. Couldn't keep her head above water at work. Had to downgrade her lifestyle to something far more modest. It should have made me feel vindicated, but the truth was, I'd already moved on. She was a shadow of a life I no longer cared to remember. The new version of myself didn't have time for her, or for the bitterness that once threatened to consume me. I was too busy building something real. I bought a new house, nothing like the one I'd shared with Linda. Sleek, modern, overlooking the city skyline. It was mine, and mine alone. A symbol of everything I'd accomplished on my own. On the day I finalized the purchase, I stood out on the balcony with a glass of whiskey in my hand, the city lights sprawling out before me. I felt nothing but satisfaction. Linda's betrayal hadn't broken me. It had reforged me. I was stronger, better, and there was no looking back. The end.